This is a Shademobile that me and Dad built. We used an old wagon chassis, and then the white oak we sawed on a sawmill. I would highly recommend that you get Joel Salatin's book on how to make his different buildings that he's designed. Trying to learn how to do this through a YouTube video, it's better to read it through a book. It was pretty complicated for me. I'm not a carpenter, but I'll just kind of go over some of the stuff that might not be clear in a book. White oak is very heavy. I would definitely have a second person helping you. If you have a tractor with front end loader, that's even better, because we had to use it even with 2 people. Made a couple modifications here. I got white oak, wrap the hose around, and then we use a bungee just to wrap the tongue up on. And then we had to get a metal fabricator. Had to get a guy to cut the steel, one of Dad's friends, then to weld the stuff on. Different metal frame on. This is not what came with the actual wagon frame, so you may have to purchase some of that, unless you know somebody or you yourself can work metal. This is what actually did come with the hay wagon frame, the one that we have. Maybe the wagon frame that you get will actually fit, but according to the designs and everything, we had modified and everything was just too rusty. So we use these as tire blocks. You're going to want to have a tire block of some sort, both for the front and the back, because the cows get to scratching around and pushing. If you're on any sort of terrain, you don't have the tires blocked, they're going to push this thing down over the hill. And then you're going to want to go ahead and put some waterproofing agent on it. I would not use pine. I would use the white oak just for the strength and also for how long it's going to last. Compared to pine, it's going to be a lot heavier. If you don't have your own sawmill, it's definitely going to be a lot more expensive. I definitely would use white oak like it says in the book. If you don't waterproof it and you don't saw the stuff on your own sawmill, you're going to spend a lot of money on this, at least a couple $1,000. And so you're definitely going to want to waterproof it. That way it lasts a lot more years and you get more out of your money. The shade cloth that we use isn't 100%. This is set at 70%. So it blocks 70% of the UV. The cows still like that. It's something where you can still see the sunlight a bit, but it actually cuts out a lot of the sun, and it's quite comfortable underneath, even though you can still see that there's holes through there. The idea behind the shade cloth instead of tin is that way you get strong gusts of wind, it's not going to flip this thing over. But so far the 70% works for us. Some people may use a type of cloth that blocks it out 100%, but this has been working for us. One of the things with the cows congregating around the Shademobile in the heat of the day is it's also going to have the flies congregating, so you're going to want to get some fly paper and some fly traps. Sometimes cows will try to chew on that stuff. We've got it high enough to where they can't reach. But even sometimes whenever it hangs down, they've been leaving the fly paper alone. You can see I've been pulling it through each day, and you can just see how many flies are on here. And then for the wiring system, we try to gravity feed everything. We have it towed up at a site where you can't see. Just run the hose down, try to keep them next to the next paddock. That way you can just pull it and slide it underneath and you don't have to move it as much. One of the systems that we are working on once we get the rest of the line taken care of is just build a frame out of white oak towards the front of the wagon, just having a tub there with a float valve. It's low enough. Old Bugsy, he's the shortest cow out of them all. He's still low enough he can reach in there and drink. So that's just something to keep in mind if you do prop your watering up on the chassis here. Depending on your paddock setup, it can be a little bit of game of musical chairs. So we got the tractor parked over there that we use to move it. We got our little separating fence. This is the paddock that they were in yesterday. Generally, they don't want to go back into the paddock that they were at prior, but if you have a new one, moving them in, they may try to run in. So for this, we tend to put wire in front, wire in back. Some people move the Shademobile every day. We just move it every other day. We don't have that many cows. It doesn't tear it up that much. Makes it a lot easier. We just put fence there, fence over there. For the new paddock, you'll have that fence completely blocked. Then you just have that opened up, and then they can get in. And then vice versa. Then the next day you'll open up the gate and shut this one. We have several different kinds of posts that we use. We got the fiberglass one here that you pound in with the pounder. We've been having to use those lately just because of the drought we've been having for the past month and a half has been making the ground really hard. You still use a step-in post a little bit, but man, it hurts your foot trying to step those in, and you can see can't really get them in quite as far. So we just been using them for now, just separate the paddocks. Ideally, we did get some rain yesterday. Ground softens up a bit, we'll be able to use these more. We just use a simple electrical cord reel, very cheap. There's a lot of stuff out there on the market that could be quite pricey, but this thing does well. There's ones with handles and without handles. I do prefer the one that has the handle just to help wind it. And then you got the little handle piece in there. I really like those. And then having the different holes there, that's nice. Just to hang them on there when you get to the end, or if you're on a T-post, you can just loop those over. You can see we're using the old trusty farmall. There's no roof to it. Both the Kubota and Big Bertha have roofs. If you have any sort of change in terrain, you really got to be careful that the top of the Shademobile doesn't smack the roof of whatever vehicle or tractor that you're using. It doesn't smack your head. I've been running the sawmill and wood chipper all day, so I'm not really the cleanest right now, but the sun came out for a bit and I wanted to show how much of a difference the shade cloth will make, even at 70%. And how much comfort it does provide for the cows. So here I'm standing in the full sun, and I'm going to back up to where I'm going to get the shade from the cloth. You can see right there how much of a difference that made. And I can really tell. And again, I can see through here, it doesn't look like much. You can see even on the ground the shadow that it casts. And there were plenty of days that would come out here and see the cows laying in this shadow. And so depending on how big of a herd you have, therefore how big of paddocks you have, just keep in mind where you park the Shademobile. You don't want to have it right up against the fence, because depending on which way you're oriented to the sun, the shade could be on the other side of the fence of the paddock, and then it's pretty much pointless having the Shademobile. Because our paddocks tend to be narrow in this particular field, we tend to park the Shademobile in the middle. That way, depending on where the sun is, that way south direction, there's always enough room for the cows to be under the shade, not have to worry about being against the fence. There is some disturbance where the cows were at the Shademobile, but the amount of manure and urine that's been put on there in a year, it's going to be quite the grassy spot. Hopefully in a year I can get some chickens to go through a couple days after the cows, like what the Salatins do, and get them to scratch up the cow patties. Right now, just working a full-time job. I don't have the time to be able to do that yet. There's old Bugsy. Bugsy's the latest addition to the herd. He's full-blooded Dexter. This is all the bigger he's going to get. He's pretty much the size of a big calf. He's a steer. I know this is blasphemy among the homesteading and cattle industry, but old Bugsy, he doesn't have much more meat on him than a big dog. Just can't bring myself to butchering him. He's pretty tame. I'd like to turn him into an ox. I'd like to figure out how to do that at some point. You can call him like a dog just like you can old Priscilla over there. I know pretty much everything out there on YouTube and what you read says about not naming animals and calling a herd and everything, but to me, if an animal has some sort of worth other than food, I'm going to keep him. Old Frank, my bloodhound, he died a year ago, so I'm going to make Bugsy my new pet. You figure on the amount of money it costs to buy a dog, especially purebred, and then your annual or sometimes monthly vet bills, especially get some sort of medical condition, and then your pet food, and then your dog license on top of other fees and expenses that you have. It's actually a lot cheaper for me to keep old Bugsy here, because you can see we turned him in among the buildings here. He's mowing for me. He's going to the bathroom. So he's fertilizing. Don't have to buy me some fertilizer. I don't have to buy any food for him. So he's actually producing more than he's taking. Because old Priscilla, she's not going to live forever as much as I'd like her to. She's already in her teens. She's been a good old cow. The rest of the calves aren't really as tame. Lips and Wendy, they're down in the barn. They're going to have their calf in about a day or two. We're just keeping them in the barnyard to keep the calves from running off since we're by the road. But even among Lips and Wendy, old Priscilla, she's the tamest. Whenever she goes, we're going to need another cow to be essentially the matriarch or the patriarch. Old Bugsy, he's a eunuch, so I don't know what you'd call him in that case. We're going to need somebody to lead the herd. That way, if they happen to get out, or we just need them to move to another paddock or area, we can just call him like a dog. And Bugsy, he's fourth in the chain of command right now. The two other big cows, they kind of boss him around, but right now he bosses the three smaller cows around, even though they're definitely much bigger than he is. And so practically speaking, it does make sense to keep these cows. It's been a really dry summer this year. I baled this field about a month and a half ago, and then just about a week ago decided to go ahead and try to pasture the cows in it. You can see the difference where the paddocks are versus where they're going to next. Now, ideally, I would want the grass to be a lot higher, but it's been well over the 30 days rest time between when we baled to when we were going to put them on. Normally, I wouldn't want the cows to eat the pasture down this short, but even still, compared to most pastures, the grass is still at a decent length. Again, just taking the drought into consideration, got to do what you got to do. There's not too many bare spots, but overall the grass is still at a decent length. Breaking up the cycle just a bit because we're going to have the cows in the next day or two around the buildings to go ahead and clean that up so I don't have to mow and weed eat. But other than that, we've been sticking with the system of moving them every day to a different paddock.